So tonight, despite everything we've learned during both the Tyler Robinson and Luigi Mangione hearings today, the fundamental question remains: what happened? What happened to these two promising young men that sent them down such an allegedly dark and murderous path? Two young men who, by all accounts, had bright futures. Robinson was a straight-A student before he was a prime suspect in Charlie Kirk's murder. As we said, he won a scholarship, dropped out after one semester, enrolled in an electrical trade school near his home. There's no word why. As for Mangione, much has been said about his life of privilege. He's an Ivy League graduate, son of a wealthy Baltimore family. Blessings he renounced, opting instead, prosecutors allege, to gun down a businessman and father on a New York City street. Both men are now facing the potential of life behind bars, even the death penalty. These two young men, however, are not alone. We're seeing an epidemic of violence in this country, increasingly at the hands of troubled young men. What is the cause, and can anything be done to stop it? There is no easy answer, for sure. Sociologists have described a crisis of masculinity that can be seen in some scary statistics. Young men today are 3 times more likely to overdose, 4 times more likely to commit suicide, and 14 times more likely to be incarcerated than their female peers. And that cauldron of alienation, self-loathing, anger, and loneliness is often stirred by social media and violent video games. Acquaintances remember that Robinson, for one, he was an introvert, and he played video games obsessively. Violent video games like Helldivers 2 may also play a role here. Authorities speculate that the game may have inspired the inscriptions that were found on the casings tied to the murder weapon. Could Robinson's online obsession have led to his alleged violence? Well, joining us to break it all down is Jen Golbeck, a computer science professor at the University of Maryland. She's also director of the MPS Data Journalism, focusing on social media privacy and trust on the web. So, Jen, over and over in the last several days, even in this show tonight, I had a former FBI assistant director, a former prosecutor say, what's happening with our young men? We need to find out. I mean, there's growing evidence that Tyler Robinson was radicalized online, according to both the governor and the prosecutor, even President Trump. But you say this isn't a partisan issue. We can see it on the left and on the right, and as well as apolitical radicalization. What do you mean?
So we see this thing happening online where people fall into these often unmoderated or lightly moderated spaces. So we're not talking about Facebook or Instagram or Reddit. There may be some things happening there, but people who get off those spaces and then start interacting in ones where more shocking content is encouraged, or memes, right, where you develop this language internal to your community, are developed and encouraged. And in those spaces, including in totally apolitical spaces, they're not right wing, they're not left wing, they don't really care about politics. We can see a push towards violence. And I tend to do my work in a lot of those spaces where violence is often celebrated, cheered on, and people talk about plotting it. Whether they go on to commit it is one of the hard questions that we're trying to solve. But we certainly see this across the political spectrum and outside of it online.
Yeah, we should note that not every young man who's a loner sitting in his basement playing violent video games all day long goes out to murder somebody. But we can also look at the fact that these two young men we've been talking about, Tyler Robinson and Luigi Mangione, as well as Thomas Crooks, the man who allegedly tried to kill President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, also a loner, also spent all of his time online playing video games. There's a connective tissue there. There's something in common.
Yeah, I think we have this issue of isolation, and social media, on one hand, can help alleviate that for people who are in places where they can't form a community. So you think of someone who's maybe part of a minority group, whether that's ethnic, religious, their lifestyle, in an isolated community. Social media can be a lifeline, but it can also be a place where people who are failing to connect, who aren't finding community, go and end up connecting with other people who take them in these antisocial directions. Now, we don't know if that's actually the cause for any of these individuals, but we we do know, looking broadly, that there are a lot of acts of mass violence committed by young men who get radicalized in these spaces because they're failing to find community and connection and social cohesion in their offline lives.
Why is it just men who end up in these places, in these social sites?
This is a very complicated question, right? But I think part of the issue is, we have this expectation of masculinity, right? We have this view from decades ago where men could get a job, support their families, were kind of in these positions of power over their families and in society. And society has changed away from that vision. And men can feel isolated by that in a way that women aren't. Women have their own
Yeah.
set of problems to deal with. But if you feel like you're supposed to have this power and you're not able to achieve that, that can feel isolating, emasculating, and drive some of these young men to want to do things to regain some of that power.
I was struck by this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today. The share of young men 20 to 34 who work has been declining. Too many young men spend their days playing video games, watching porn, smoking pot, and trolling the internet rather than engaging with the real world. Mr. Kirk sought to bring young people out of their digital caves. It's harder to hate someone you meet in flesh than as an avatar in the digital dystopia. Quite a summary, but I think it's true. You know, when you're all alone and you're swimming around in that cesspool and you've got other like-minded people and it's all nihilistic and cheering and egging each other on, you start to lose touch with reality.
I think that's true. And what we do know from the literature is that if you take people from different ends of the political spectrum and you want to increase their engagement, you want to decrease the extremism and the polarization, having them talk face to face is an effective way to do that.
Yeah.
It's the core of democracy. I don't know that Charlie Kirk was effective at that. I mean, he did go
I'm
talk
not
to
saying
people.
he was. I'm just reading the op-ed, but
No,
anything to
point
get
taken.
people out. I mean, listen, he did sit there and encourage people to stand in line and debate him face to face, which, no matter what you think of his point of view, at least they're not downstairs in the basement and in the dark, saying all sorts of awful things online. Listen, this is a great conversation. I'd love to have you back because I think this is a big issue that we're going to be talking about for a while. Jen Golbeck, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.